Ethan Vale had never been good with surprises. The last time someone shouted his name unexpectedly, he dropped an entire tray of quantum screws into an antimatter recycler. The resulting mini-explosion had earned him both a week-long lecture and the affectionate nickname Boomer. So, when the alarm blared through Docking Bay 7 and the air shimmered with plasma turbulence, Ethan's first instinct wasn't bravery. It was to hide behind the nearest crate of spare conduits and mutter, "Not my problem." But, unfortunately, it became very much his problem when the crash doors buckled open, and a sleek, organic-looking shuttle slid across the floor like a wounded serpent. Its hull gleamed with iridescent scales instead of plating, and faint blue fire rippled from its vents. Ethan blinked at it, trying to decide if it was a ship or a very confused life form. Then the hatch hissed open, releasing a wave of heated air that smelled faintly of cinnamon and ozone. Out stepped a girl, no, a woman, tall and radiant, her skin glowing faintly gold under the emergency lights. Her long silver hair flowed as though gravity had given up, and her ears, long, elegant, twitching like finely tuned sensors, gave her away instantly. Dragonfolk. Everyone froze. Even the station's cleaning drones stopped mid-cycle. The woman's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Ethan, crouched behind his crate. Her face brightened with the kind of joy normally reserved for lottery winners and cult leaders. She pointed straight at him and shouted, voice ringing like crystal, "Mom, that's the human of my dreams." The hangar went silent. Someone coughed. The fire suppression system, confused, deployed foam over a perfectly safe corner. Ethan opened his mouth, found no words, and closed it again. His brain helpfully replayed the phrase "human of my dreams" like a broken, hollow advert. Somewhere behind her, an enormous silhouette filled the hatchway, wings like solar sails, eyes like collapsing stars. A voice that could probably bend steel asked, "Zephyra, dear, what did you just say?" Ethan fainted standing up. Ethan woke up to the smell of something burnt and vaguely metallic. His left arm had a new coating of foam, courtesy of the station's overzealous fire suppression system, and a coffee machine lay in ruins on the floor. Somehow, in the chaos of Zephyra's arrival, he had managed to press brew on autopilot, and the result had been catastrophic. "Don't look so pale, human," Zephyra said, hovering above him like a hovering sunbeam. Her long ears twitched as she leaned closer, examining him as if he were a rare specimen of sentient nervousness. "You're even cuter when you panic." Ethan tried to find a witty retort, but the words lodged somewhere between his throat and his rapidly beating heart. Thank you," he muttered, hoping his voice didn't betray him like a poorly calibrated hollow microphone. "Mom's not thrilled, though," she added, eyes glinting with mischief. "She thinks you're, how do you humans say it, a walking hazard to public safety." Before Ethan could protest, the Empress herself strode in, her scales glittering under the hangar lights like molten garnets. She scanned him once, twice, then let out a low rumble that sounded suspiciously like amusement. "You, human, are either incredibly brave or utterly foolish. Which is it?" Ethan's brain short-circuited. "I repair things," he squeaked. "Machines mostly. I carefully." Zephyra giggled, and the sound was like glass chimes in a breeze. "See, Mom, he's perfect. He even blushes when he's terrified." The Empress raised an eyebrow, and Ethan realized he was probably glowing a shade that would make a fusion reactor jealous. Somewhere, a maintenance drone tripped over a cable and flailed dramatically, as if echoing his internal state. By the time the comms officer finished explaining that this incident had already gone viral across 3 star systems, Ethan's knees threatened to fold. Zephyra reached out, brushing a spark off his shoulder with a smile. "Relax, human, it's only the beginning." Ethan wasn't sure whether to laugh or run, so he did both, clumsily, into a stack of anti-gravity crates. Ethan's workshop had never felt smaller, or more alive. Zephyra perched on a hovering work table, her long ears flicking at every whir of the machinery, every spark from his soldering iron. You humans really are complicated, she mused, watching him carefully align a quantum flux conduit. So fragile, yet kind of fascinating. I'm not fragile, Ethan muttered, tightening a bolt that might have been purely ornamental. I'm engineered for resilience. He hoped his voice sounded confident, but a tiny hiss of static from a nearby circuit suggested otherwise. Zephyra leaned closer, examining his concentration. I like that about you, she said, her amber eyes glowing. You overthink everything, it's adorable. Her finger hovered near the conduit and Ethan flinched. Relax, I won't. A tiny spark leapt from her fingertip and set his sleeve briefly ablaze. Adorable, Ethan yelped, smacking at his sleeve with a damp cloth. I am not adorable, I'm a highly trained engineer. She laughed, the sound echoing like music through the metal walls. Sure, sure. You're terrifyingly capable at spilling molten plasma on yourself. He gawked at her. That's not how I meant. Zephyra's ears twitched with delight. I didn't mean it badly. You're refreshing. She waved her hands, and the stray sparks vanished into thin air. You humans are all chaos wrapped in nervous energy, and it's fun. Ethan blinked. Chaos, nervous energy, fun. Those were not exactly credentials he'd listed on his resume. He rubbed his temples, trying to recalibrate his mental circuits. And, Zephyra added, tipping her head with a mischievous glint, your ears would totally complement mine if you grew them. Imagine matching antennae. Ethan groaned. That's terrifying. She only giggled, sending a ripple of tiny sparks across the workshop. See, chaos, fun, that's why you're perfect. He stared at her, trying to decide whether he was in the middle of a science experiment or a very vivid hallucination induced by high voltage and charm. Ethan's invitation to the royal flagship felt like stepping into a starship-sized pressure cooker. Every corridor hummed with energy, walls shimmering with embedded quantum panels that displayed moving constellations. He shuffled forward, trying not to trip over his own boots, or over the subtle gravitational fluctuations designed to make dragonfolk feel at home. Zephyra floated beside him, her long ears twitching as if scanning the air for danger. Relax, human. Mom's testing you, not vaporizing you, she whispered. Her golden eyes glimmered, but there was a teasing curve to her lips that made Ethan nervous anyway. The Empress waited in a throne that seemed to float in midair, rings of light orbiting her like miniature moons. Her gaze swept over him with precision. State your purpose, she commanded. Ethan swallowed. I repair starships. Design propulsion systems. Handle molten plasma without major casualties. He realized mid-sentence that his brain sounded like a malfunctioning AI. Zephyra leaned forward, whispering, You can do it, human. Charm her with a human charm. I left that module in my other jumpsuit, Ethan muttered under his breath. The Empress raised an eyebrow. Explain why a human should be considered worthy. Ethan opened his mouth, and words tumbled out in a chaotic torrent about empathy, curiosity, and the subtle art of emotional honesty. Somewhere, a translation drone hovered above, recording and replaying every word in an exaggerated romantic tone. Flawless reasoning, it intoned, in what Ethan assumed was a sarcastic robotic voice. The entire chamber erupted into a mix of muffled laughter and low, rumbling chuckles. Even the Empress' expression softened, though she tried to hide it behind a scale of judgment. Zephyra's laughter sparkled like plasma fireworks, and Ethan felt simultaneously heroic, roasted, and completely human. By the time he finished, a maintenance droid had fainted from shock. Ethan smiled awkwardly. Well, that went well. Zephyra leaned over and whispered, Perfect. You're terrifyingly human and I love it. The reactor chamber smelled faintly of ozone and burnt toast. Ethan's contribution, of course. Zephyra hovered above the plasma core, her silver hair floating as though the ship's gravity were a polite suggestion rather than a rule. You humans are so panicky, she said, her amber eyes glinting. It's cute and terrifying. I'm *careful*, Ethan said. waving a spanner that had narrowly escaped melting in the reactor's heat flux. I am extremely careful. Some might even call me precautionarily heroic. Zephyra snorted, sending a tiny cascade of sparks into the air. Heroic, sure, also slightly prone to spontaneous combustions. He gave her a look, then nearly jumped out of his skin when a panel sparked beside him. This isn't spontaneous combustion, it's an advanced safety demonstration. They worked in chaotic harmony, the reactor core flickering between hues of blue and violet, as Ethan adjusted conduits and Zephyra manipulated energy fields with graceful sweeps of her hands. She hummed a tune that resonated with the core, making the machinery thrum like a heartbeat. Ethan couldn't decide if he was repairing a reactor or conducting an interstellar orchestra. "You humans have a funny stubborn streak," Zephyra said, her long ears twitching. "I like that. You won't give up even when your circuits scream abandon ship." "And you dragons," Ethan replied, dodging a tiny flare from her fingertips, "have a funny obsession with making humans sweat." "Merely motivating you." She leaned closer, eyes gleaming. "Besides, watching you panic is scientifically fascinating." Hours passed, measured in sparks and nervous laughter, until finally the reactor stabilized. Ethan wiped soot off his forehead, proud but exhausted. Zephyra floated near him, brushing a glowing hand over his shoulder. "See, chaos and terror, but we survived, together." He tried to smile, then coughed as a stray spark singed his sleeve. "Yeah, together, also slightly singed thanks to teamwork." She laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber like interstellar chimes. "Exactly what makes you perfect." And Ethan realized that amidst plasma leaks, sparks, and awkward flirting, something was beginning to ignite between them, far more unpredictable than any reactor. Ethan sat cross-legged in his workshop, surrounded by holographic schematics, floating toolkits, and the occasional spark that hissed like an annoyed miniature dragon. "All right, love. EXC," he muttered, tapping a sequence into his portable console. "Let's prove once and for all that human-dragon compatibility is not just a social hazard." Zephyra hovered nearby, her long ears twitching in amusement. "You're building an AI to calculate love?" she asked, voice half incredulous, half delighted. "That's adorably human." "I call it scientifically responsible," Ethan said, trying not to grimace as the console whirred. "I mean, emotions are important, but measurable emotions, even better." She leaned over the console, eyes glowing amber. "Can it predict if I'll combust with excitement when you blush?" "Potentially," Ethan replied, pressing a hollow button. A flurry of lights erupted across the room as love. EXE booted up, displaying heart-shaped graphs, probability matrices, and animated sparks that made the schematics look like a miniature fireworks show. "Your hair looks like it's on fire," Zephyra teased, pointing at the tiny sparks hovering around his head. "It's an ambient effect," Ethan muttered, swatting at a spark that had landed on his sleeve. "Completely normal, don't judge." The AI pinged, flashing a cheerful green. "Result, 99.7% compatibility, cross-species emotional resonance, optimal, human-dragon bond statistically adorable." Zephyra gasped, eyes widening with delight. "Adorable? Me, no. You're adorable, Ethan Vale, human disaster extraordinaire." He blinked, caught off guard. "IUH, thank you." He tripped over a floating toolkit, sending it spinning across the room. "See." She laughed, ducking to avoid the spinning wrench. "Chaos, fun, and love, apparently." Ethan rubbed his temples, smiling awkwardly. "I think my circuit's just overloaded." "And mine," she said, leaning closer, overheated with affection. For the first time, in a room full of sparks, graphs, and floating tools, Ethan realized that some equations, no matter how precise, couldn't capture the unpredictable, incandescent chaos of the heart. The warning came as a series of flashing red lights and a nervous holographic assistant sputtering. "Unauthorized diplomatic threat detected.